Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm going to be reacting to Purnam, the full Swami Sarvarpiyananda. In a way, this is the opposite of what I reacted to his last time. I can't remember. I think it was the void. This is the full, obviously. So let's go ahead and get started.
Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityurma amritam gamaya om shanti shanti shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Namaste and welcome. Another brilliant day here in Manhattan. Today the subject is Purnam. It's a Sanskrit word which means the whole, the full, infinite, limitless. This actually forms a pair with last Sunday's talk, which was titled Shunyam, which means the void or emptiness. So emptiness and fullness. In fact, just a little correction for last Sunday's talk. I mentioned a particular book, Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness, and I said somebody who had recommended it to me, but it turns out somebody else had recommended, and he wrote in, no, it was me. I recommended it to you. So it was Jackson Peterson, who is a Tibetan Buddhist master and teacher in this country and abroad also, many places abroad. So we are very grateful to him because that book really put a lot of things in place for me. Purnam, why I selected this as, this is sort of, for me, this is a word which encompasses the vision of Vedanta in its entirety and its depth. For me, it is particularly evocative because when I was growing up, a little boy in a city called Bhubaneswar on the eastern coast of India, we have a very beautiful Ramakrishna Mission ashram there, which was founded all the way back in 1918 by Swami Brahmananda, the first president of the Ramakrishna order, whom Sri Ramakrishna considered his spiritual son. Beautiful ashram and very, very deep spiritual vibrations there. Now, as a little kid, one of the memories of the ashram that I have is going upstairs to the shrine. The shrine was on the roof, it still is, but in the old shrine, when you go up there, this was about 40 years ago. First you entered through a room, you used to in those days, and that room was a bare little room, very sparse, and I can still feel the cool floor on my bare feet and the sunlight streaming through the open windows. There's a very beautiful garden outside and very silent, except for sometimes chirping of birds. And there was just this one mantra written on a wooden board hung up on the wall. That's all. There was nothing else in that room as far as I remember. And that mantra said, in Sanskrit, the famous Shanti mantra from the Upanishads, Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, which means Om, that is the infinite Brahman. That means, I'll explain that. So that is the infinite Brahman. This manifested universe is also Purnam, is that infinite Brahman, is Brahman. And from that Purnam, this Purnam has come. From that fullness, this fullness has arisen. Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya. In this manifested universe, if you recognize the infinite here, then Purnam eva avashishyate. The infinity alone remains, or the fullness alone remains. So if you put it together, what does it say? It says, that is the full. This universe is also the full. And this fullness has come from that fullness. And in this, if you recognize the infinity, then that fullness or that infinity alone remains.
Very interesting that he used the words, that fullness, this fullness comes from that fullness. This fullness comes from that fullness. As opposed to say, this fullness and that fullness are one and the same. Let's hear that again.
The infinity. Then that fullness, or that if you recognize the infinity, then that fullness or that infinity alone remains.
Okay.
Oh, this universe. Together, what does it say? It says, that is the full. This universe is also the full. And this fullness has come from that fullness. And in this, if you recognize the infinity, then that fullness or that infinity alone remains.
I'm wondering if that's kind of maybe a mistranslation or something, as to mean that no intent of separation, but more like the sheer fact that the fullness, the two fullnesses are actually one and the same. It's just that we as human beings sees it as potentially two fullnesses. Two different fullnesses, even though it's really one and the same. Perhaps that's what he's trying to say here, as opposed to saying this fullness comes from that fullness, meaning that there's two separate fullness, like how we come from our mothers. We're two separate beings, but we came from our mother. So again, I'm being a bit harsh here, but I just want to make sure I understood correctly. And I'm assuming, due to how Advaita Vedanta is, that there's no other. There's only one, only Brahman, and that's it. That probably meant to say that fullness and this fullness are one and the same, meaning that you think there's two, but in reality there's just one.
Om, peace, peace, peace. Now, I don't know how much I understood of that. I was a little kid. I knew some Sanskrit because we were studying it in school, so I was able to read it. But it was very evocative for me. I don't know if it's some kind of memories of past life or something, but I always was fascinated. I remember before going to the shrine, I would stop and stare and just soak in the sunlight and the stillness in that room and that mantra on the wall. That's why it's always remained my favorite peace chant, Shanti mantra. Today, I want to go a little bit into it. It's the deepest truth about Vedanta, about Hinduism. I think it's really great to reflect upon it a little bit. Let's go into this, in the profound depths of this mantra a little bit before we go ahead. Purnamadaha Purnamidam. The Sanskrit words ada idam. Ada means that. Something that is not perceptible. You don't see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it. You can't comprehend it with your intellect. You don't have any information about it. It's something that you take on belief. For example, God. God is in heaven. I don't see God. I don't understand it not too well. It's beyond my perception. It's beyond creation. That. In Sanskrit, there's a word for it, paroksha. Paroksha means beyond the range of our senses. It's suprasensible. So that is full or infinity. That which is paroksha, beyond our range of our senses, which we take on belief. Maybe our religion has told us about it. Maybe we sort of believe in it, some kind of transcendent reality. And then it says, Purnamidam. This one, which we perceive right now, this world. This also is full. This is also full. Now, concentrate on the words idam and ada. Idam means this perceptible universe, which we are experiencing all the time. Ada means that, transcendent, which we don't experience, and we sort of either believe in it or don't believe in it. In any case, even if you believe in it, you take it on faith. And now see what the mantra is doing. It's so subversive. It just says both that which is transcendent and that which is right now here empirically perceived and which you're experiencing all the time. They're the same thing.
Okay. You just said it
By
there.
using the word Purnam, that's Purnam. This is Purnam. It's exactly the same thing. What has been done here is Paroksha and this Pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means direct. These two words are brought together and both are called Purnam. By that, what is done is, there's a Sanskrit word, badhita, negated. The remoteness and the immediate perceptibility, both of them are negated by showing that it's one reality. Go a little further. If that sounds cryptic and difficult, it'll become easier. But it is a very profound subject. If you go a little further, the next part of the mantra says, Purnat Purnam Udachyate. From that fullness, this fullness has arisen. If you want to put it in the language of theistic religion, God created the world. That's what is being said. God created the world. God created the world. From that fullness, this fullness has arisen. In the Sanskrit grammar of it, Purnat, that's the fifth case ending. From that. Fifth case. Always from that means cause. A cause is being pointed out. And this is the effect. That is the creator. This is the created. And again the mantra does something subversive. It says that and this, that cause and this effect are both Purnam. They are not both. They are the same Purnam. By saying that what has been done, causality is negated. From that, this has been created. The mantra is saying, no, nothing has been created. That alone exists. We are experiencing it as this. But this Purnam, this limitless, this whole, that alone exists. There is no difference between cause and effect. See, this is very profound. Because in traditional theistic religion, dualistic religion, what is said? God is the cause, the creator. And this universe is the created. Dualistic in the sense of two different realities. So the cause is real. The dualistic religion will say cause is real. There are dualistic schools of Vedanta which will say the cause, God is real, and this manifested universe is also real. Two realities. And they're separate. The two realities. God has created a separate universe. It's not that they are the same. The non-dualist, the Advaitin, will ask here a question, is that, see, if that is real, nobody doubts that the creator, God, Brahman is real. Neither the dualist nor the non-dualist doubts. Both agree. There is some cause, Brahman, which is real. Some reality, Brahman. It's real. Now, the non-dualist asks this question to the dualist. If that is real, and something has come from that, something other than that has come. If something is other than reality, what happens to it? It becomes unreal. Becomes false. In fact, my dear dualist, when you claim that the world is a separate reality created by a creator God, it's equivalent to claiming the world is false. Because it's other than the real God, which I and you, both of us, agree. Whereas what the Advaitin says is that that Purnam and this Purnam, the cause Purnam and the effect Purnam, they are both one and the same. There is no cause and effect. This is the deepest conclusion which you find in texts like the Mandukya Karika, for example. Negation of causality. There is apparent causality. And there is something which appears as this, because they look different, they are experienced differently. It's like the gold made into the ornaments, the clay made into the pot. Now you will say, clay has produced a pot. If you say, produced a pot, is there a pot apart from the clay? If you look at the pot, it's clay and clay throughout. If you look at the golden ornament, it's gold and gold throughout. And the claim of this mantra is that if you examine this world, which appears to be a world of duality, of diversity, of continuous change, of ups and downs, of pleasure and pain, of life and death, if you actually examine, if we have eyes to see, we will see that absolute truth alone exists here. Satchidananda alone exists here. See, what I'm saying is this. I remember asking this great Swami who passed away several years ago, Swami Nirmuktanandaji. He was a disciple of Swami Shivananda. I believe he was a spiritually very advanced soul. Many of us did believe. So once I asked him that he was sitting, if you have gone to Belur Mutt, the main monastery there on the bank of the Ganga, you've seen the temple of the Holy Mother, Ma Sharada. So he was sitting there and facing towards the temple of Swami Vivekananda. He was sitting there, and he was at that time in his late 90s. So this Swami, I bowed down to him and I asked this question. So how does the enlightened one look upon this, this world? Is it that there is Brahman and existence, consciousness, bliss, and this world is like a kind of a shadow? And then he thought for a moment and he said, no, why should that be? There is only one. This idea that there is a reality and there is a falsity, that there is a falsity, this is still dualistic thinking. This comes from an analysis, Here in this world of appearances, I am analyzing and finding out the reality, and so this world remains as an appearance. Reality and appearance. But they are not two. But he told me, why should that be? There is only one. And of course, I had to push. So I asked him, all right, I didn't quite get what he was saying. All right, but is that how you are seeing this? I was trying to find out, is he going to confirm that he's enlightened? Is that how you are seeing the world right now? Are you seeing this display right now as one divine reality? And he replied with another story. He said, there was another very great monk, Swami Buddhananda and Swami Jagadananda, disciple of the Holy Mother. Jagadananda was regarded as an enlightened person in his own time. This was in the 1950s probably. So one day, this Swami Buddhananda, who was in charge of our Ramakrishna mission in Delhi, he asked Swami Jagadananda apparently, well, sir, people say you're enlightened. Are you enlightened? And the Swami replied, if I say yes, will you believe me? I immediately understood what the Swami was trying to tell me. And I bowed down to him and said, yes, sir, I've understood, Swami. So this is a question about so if you're saying, are you trying to say that this itself is Brahman, what we are experiencing? It doesn't look like it. There is this question about the reality of the world and the falsity of the world. There are schools of Vedanta which say the world is real. There are schools of Vedanta, like Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta, which we're speaking about, which say the world is false. And there's a big quarrel about it. Is the world real or false? Is it a reality in itself, or is it an appearance? Really speaking, that question is misguided. Sri Ramakrishna was asked once that is the world false? Like Advaita Vedanta would have it would say. Sri Ramakrishna said, why should the world be false? That is a step in Vedantic inquiry. In Bengali, he said, Bicharer Katha, in the step in Vedantic inquiry. Now, it's a very nuanced reply. He did not say the world is not false, it's real. He didn't say that. He didn't say, of course the world is false. He said, no, when you say the world is false, he knows what's in the mind of the person who's asking. The person is asking from an Advaitic perspective, non-dual perspective. See, that's a step in non-dual inquiry. Bicharer Katha, in Bengali, he said. But that's not remarkable also. Sri Ramakrishna's observation, that's a Vicharer Katha, it's not remarkable because Advaita itself, Advaitic texts like the Panchadashi, a classic of post-Shankara Advaita, they also say the world is false. I'll tell you exactly what they say. Vidyaranya Swami, the author of the text Panchadashi, he says, what is the status of the world? Is it real or is it false? And who is saying this? A follower of Adi Shankaracharya, committed non-dualist, the author of the non-dual classic Panchadashi. He says that this world, he says, to the ordinary man in the street, he says, Vastavi, it's absolutely real. It can't be ignored. It's real. Vastavi means Vastu, real. To the philosopher, to the inquirer, he says it is Anirvachaniya. It cannot be classified as real ultimately, or as unreal. That is the definition of falsity. Something that appears to us, like the rope, like the snake in the rope. It appears to us, like the water in the mirage. It appears to us, but it's not real in itself. There's no real water in the mirage. There's no real snake when it's actually a rope. So something that appears but does not exist. You can't deny that it appeared to you. For a moment you thought it was something else. So that's called falsity. It's like a lie. Somebody tells a lie. It's not the truth. But it's not nothing either. It didn't keep quiet. See, there are three things: telling the truth, and keeping quiet, and telling a lie. So when somebody tells a lie, the person did say something. It's not nothing, but it's not the truth. Similarly, falsity is when we experience the reality as something other than what it is. So we experience the rope as a snake. You're not experiencing a rope as a rope. You're experiencing the desert not as a desert, but as an oasis full of water. That's a mirage. So Panchadashi, the author of Panchadashi, Vidyaranya Swami, says, when you inquire with logic, when you reason, you will come to this conclusion that the world is an appearance. It's not nothing, but it's not the ultimate truth. You can't say it's nothing because it appears to you. You experience it all the time. But you can't say it's the ultimate truth, which is pure consciousness, existence, whatever you call it. And then he goes on to say, this author of Panchadashi, to the enlightened one. So three views: the worldly man's view, the philosopher's view, and the enlightened one's view. To the enlightened one, he says, there is no world, there's Brahman alone. There's only one non-dual reality. Just like that Swami told me. Why should it be two? It's only one. Because I had asked that Swami, is it that you see, the enlightened one sees absolute reality, existence, consciousness, bliss, and this world like a shadow sort of hanging around, And he said, no, it's not like that. It's one. And the one is Brahman, or that absolute reality. So see, three answers to the question, is the world real? To the man on the street, yes, the world is real. Vastavi, it's true. To the person in a dream, whatever he is experiencing in the dream doesn't know it's a dream. It's real. It's practically, it's what is being experienced. But when you inquire into it, it's neither real nor non-existing. It's what is called false. And for the fully enlightened one, it's Brahman. Brahman alone exists. There's no separate reality called the world. And that's what exactly Sri Ramakrishna said. When Sri Ramakrishna was asked, is this world false? He said, why should it be false? That falsity of the world is a stage in inquiry. That philosophical inquiry, when you do vichara, you come to this conclusion. The world cannot be determined as absolutely real or as completely unreal. So what is being said here is, Purnat Purnam Udachyate. If you literally translate, it means from the full, this fullness has come. But if you look a little deeper, that is being called, the cause is being called Purnam, and the effect is also being called Purnam, effectively denying that there is any cause and effect. That really nothing has happened. It seems to have happened that way, that the world seems to have appeared before you. Something has been produced, but actually it is the same reality. Purnam. In which case, what is being said here? What's being said here is, whatever we are experiencing, wherever we are, worldly, spiritual, in whatever sense, whichever religion we belong to, whatever we are experiencing, the dramatic claim is you are experiencing nothing but God. Swami Vivekananda said, never approach anything except as God. Because that's the fact. The fact is that there's only one non-dual reality. If Advaita Vedanta is true, in that case, whatever is real must be that one reality, because it's non-dual, no second reality. If there are multiple realities, maybe, right, I'm experiencing a reality called a world, and there is some other reality called God, heaven, something else. But if it is non-dual, Advaita, then whatever we are experiencing must be that non-dual reality. In other words, whatever we are experiencing in the language of religion must be God. It's a very, why it is profound, it's a very capacious idea of the ultimate reality. What do I mean by that is, what this Purnamada Purnamidam is saying is, if if it is formless and it cannot be with form, it's an incomplete God. If it is with form and you deny that it can ever be formless, it's an incomplete God. If you say it is with form, but it only has to be, God has to be a male form, it's an incomplete God. Always Shiva goes with Shakti. And Shakti, you cannot say it is only Shakti. There's always Shiva in the background. If it's only female, then it's an incomplete God. If it's only to be worshipped in a form which is with a human form, it's an incomplete God. That's why in Sanatana Dharma, in Hinduism, you have God being worshipped as a fish, the Matsya Avatara, as the tortoise, the Kurma Avatara, as the man lion, in the human form, in the male form, in the female form, in the male and female form together, Ardhanarishwara, and with no form, formless. But the idea always is, if you say it is only formless, then it's an incomplete God. Then comes the Muslim or the Christian and says, well, God is formless, and these Hindus have got it wrong. Smash these images and destroy the temples. No, it's an incomplete idea of God you have got. It leads to fanaticism, it leads to hatred, it leads to violence. It is what is called in Vedanta, in yoga also, raga dvesha, likes and dislikes. Strong likes and dislikes. See, what is the problem with strong likes and dislikes? Practically it's all right. People can have preferences. We'll automatically have preferences. However, deep within, we should not hold on to these preferences as ultimately true. Because if it is a non-dual reality, then whatever we are experiencing, whether we prefer it, whether we don't prefer it, whether we love it or whether we hate it, it must be the same reality. The same Brahman in our friends and in what we consider to be our enemies. In people like us and in what we see as people different from us. In human beings and in non-human beings. In living beings and in non-living things. It must be the same background reality somewhere. Otherwise, non-duality cannot be true. When we have this idea of non-duality, it translates into Purnam. And that is what you see, if you look at the enormous breadth and richness of the Sanatana Dharma of Hinduism. The non-dualistic schools, dualistic schools, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita, all the different schools. How can it be such extraordinary variety can happily coexist with each other? Even a lot of Hindus don't understand this. So there have been occasionally reform schools. No, we must not worship images, and therefore let's have a reformed Hinduism without image worship. And there were reform movements always. That's all right. Hinduism is fine with that too. Sri Ramakrishna came up as a bulwark against this silliness. He comes and quite unapologetically, he goes and worships an image. And the image of Kali, Bhavatarini Kali, in Dakshineshwar. And reaches enlightenment, not just enlightenment. The range and breadth of his spiritual experiences is unparalleled in the history of spirituality. Show me one other instance of such extraordinary samadhis, of such extraordinary mystical experiences, of such extraordinarily universal teachings. No, you cannot find another example like that. That's why Vivekananda said, if image worship can produce one like Ramakrishna, worship 1,000 images, I say. So Purnam, a capacious idea of the divine. If the divine is worshipped as Shiva, the male form, as Parvati or Durga, or Kali, and Lakshmi in the female form, as Ganesha. If your God cannot be an elephant-headed God, it's an incomplete God. But if your God is only the elephant-headed God, it's also an incomplete God. So where does this extraordinarily capacious idea of divinity come from? From Purnam. It includes all of it. Last time we did Buddhism, and you can say this sounds very different from it. That sounds very minimal, extraordinarily logical and minimal, philosophically austere. This sounds very maximal, inclusive of anything and everything. What this does is, it frees us from raga dvesha, from our from thinking that this alone must be right and that cannot be right. It frees us from fanaticism. It frees us from thinking that only Sri Ramakrishna, when one thing he did not like at all, he would say again and again. In Bengali he said, Matuar buddhi, dogmatic attitude. He said, never set a limit to what God can be. Never set a limit to the infinitude of that ultimate reality. That comes from this Purnam. The fullness of what is experienced here and there. In the cause and in the effect. It's the same reality. All right, I still haven't started.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but it's just like, oh, sorry, I haven't started. We're 30 minutes into this video and it hasn't even started. I'm actually going to pause it right here. That really caught me off guard. I didn't really say too much. I guess I'm coughing quite a bit, so I had to pause quite a few times. It's very interesting, though, that I didn't really have too much to say because it's all essentially a learning. There wasn't too much to comment except for those few times. And he did explain after the fact, and I realized, like, okay, yeah, he essentially saying that the reality up there and down here are one and the same, even though, at least when that speech, when he said it, it made it sound like there was potentially two different realities, even though I know, well, at least I understood that Advaita Vedanta is non-duality. So towards the end here, it's very interesting that it said Purnam, the idea that there's no separate, there's only one, so therefore you cannot really hate, you can't hate God. You can't, everyone's God or everything's God, and if you hate someone, you're hating God, and that's not a good thing. Whereas you look at duality religions or Abrahamic religions where, if you don't follow this, then you're the other and you're wrong, and you develop fanatical groups or hatred towards one another just because, they don't believe in the same thing as you do, which is, very much true. It's kind of a survival thing, really. It's where they indoctrinate you, they threaten you with a freaking hell or punishment for not believing the same things they do, and then just kind of keeping it, I guess, in a sense, in the family. And obviously they had wars between the Muslims and the Christian during the 100 Years War, or is that a different kind of war? Can't remember. I know they had the Crusades for sure, but yeah, because obviously there's two different religions and you don't accept each other, so obviously they're gonna fight it out. But yeah, and it's very interesting. I like the fact that he stated the fact that in Hinduism, everything's acceptable, and the fact that if you restrict God, that then it's an incomplete God. It's a very interesting way to look at it. It's like, oh, so God cannot be this. You're making, in a sense, it's like, are you making your God weak because he cannot be this? So if you worship a dog, and you're saying that's God, and saying like in a Christian sense that, oh yeah, I'm worshiping this dog because he's God, a figure of a dog, and the Christian would probably get very offended. It's like, that's not God. You either worship the baby God or Jesus or do they actually have an image of God? I don't know if they do. It's usually Jesus. Is that what they worship? I don't know if they have an image of God. Anyways, saying, oh, are you telling me that God cannot be a dog? And if you ask them the question, I'm kind of curious. It's like, they'll probably say, no, he can be, but why would he be? So that's a very interesting take that Swami here said about Hinduism, is the fact that you can have Ganesh, an elephant head god, or Kali, and all these different forms. I guess that's the reason why it makes sense. I know I've said this before and people correct me. I still don't quite understand. I said there's 330 million plus gods that Hinduism worship. I mean, it makes sense, you know. Again, you have the very famous one, I guess, one of the famous ones, I suppose, of Ganesh, which is the elephant head god. I do remember that. You have many different forms of gods, and I think he also stated the one where I think the worship, I think, is a fish. So they're saying that there's not 330 million gods, but there's like 3 something or 4 something. I can't remember. But I mean, again, I don't know. Like, I hear Lakhani say 330 million gods. Then I hear people say there's not 330 million gods. There's like a certain section, and they kind of fall under that. Perhaps, I'm not sure. Anyways, if you know what I'm talking about there, and if you know what I'm trying to ask, then if you don't mind explaining. Anyways, that's part 1 for this reaction. I want to keep it short just because, for one, I think I'm coughing a little bit too much for this one, and I'm struggling not to cough on the mic. So I'm going to pause it right here since he didn't start anyway. That is kind of... It's interesting stories, don't get me wrong. But my gosh, 30 minutes in, it hasn't started yet. It sounds like me talking too much. Anyways, that's the end of part 1. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. Thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.